Hello and welcome to Fifi and the In-Between, the channel for original short stories of fantasy to occupy your mind and inspire your deepest self. This is the story Lilikoi, the Lava Walker, based on the children's story of the same name by Stephanie Sang. If you ever travel to the islands in the middle of the great blue Pacific, where cliffs drape themselves in green vines and the mountains breathe vapor into the sky, you may hear people whisper about a child named Lilikoi. Some say Lilikoi was born during an eruption, the child's mother swallowed in molten rock. Some say Pele herself heard the baby wailing and took pity on the motherless child. Some say the sea rose high that night, trying to swallow the child and end its pain. Everyone agrees on this. Lilikoi could walk on lava, molten rivers glowing as red as demon tongues, and the fire never burned the child's feet. Lilikoi grew up in a village balanced between two beasts. Behind the village was a living, breathing volcano. Ahead of the village stretched the endless, pitiless Pacific. Neither of them knew much about forgiveness. Every morning smelled of salt and sulfur. Traditions of respect were built to honor both and stay in their good graces. The people fished the sea, but always with caution running through their blood, never letting their guard down or disregarding the quiet warnings in the waves and the wind. The people brought umbilical cords to the mountain, never forgetting that every child was indebted to the mantle below the surface. Both of these things could be fickle and destroy them for reasons they'd never understand. Lilikoi's father, Ailani, carved canoes from koa wood and told tales that he claimed were true. Lilikoi had doubts, but could never prove him wrong. When Lilikoi was born and left upon hot basalt, the villagers whispered. Before it was known that the child could walk on lava, a different gift appeared, a riddle. When Lilikoi's grandmother found the baby, she laughed. She lifted the child high and announced to the villagers in the search party, "The world made room for this one twice." That was all. And because Grandmother Mele said it so confidently, people accepted the child, mostly. Children, however, are not known to whisper their thoughts. They ask questions adults are afraid to speak. When Lilikoi was 6, a boy asked, "Are you a boy or a girl?" Lilikoi answered, "Yes." The boy frowned so hard it looked painful. The other children laughed. Lilikoi laughed too, although later that night they sat beside the basalt tide pools and stared at their reflection wobbling in the moonlit water. They wondered if the ocean ever felt as confused as they had felt when the other children laughed. Lilikoi discovered their more celebrated gift when they were 8. An earthquake shook the village awake before dawn. It didn't seem like much. Dogs barked, bowls rattled slightly. People who have never lived among volcanoes imagine them as some gigantic sleeping trolls turning beneath the earth, waking violently, loud, explosive. But that is not the way of Kilauea. Instead, her always open mouth grew larger when her emotions stirred and spread across her face, trailing down towards the ocean. Lava is human-like. It destroys the way old kings do, sometimes erratic with choices that defy logic. Most of the time, the villagers could predict the lava's path. They gathered a safe distance away, watching the orange-red glow pierce through the darkness. Lilikoi, however, was drawn to the lava like a moth to a flame, and from the moment the child felt the mountain's sleepy grumble spread like a shiver, they sought the heat. Lilikoi wandered off into the dark, led by a curiosity so fierce, no rock or tree or river could stand in the way. Not a single person in the village noticed the child was gone. Until, in the distance, they noticed a figure, no more than a small black silhouette against the radiant light pouring past. "Lilikoi?" Iolani shouted. But the child was too far to hear his voice, and the molten rock hissed and groaned loud enough to drown out any other sounds. Lilikoi stared at it, entranced. Something inside them answered, a recognition, and long before anyone could stop them, Lilikoi stepped onto the lava. The entire village screamed, all except Grandmother Mele. She simply narrowed her eyes. Lilikoi stood on the radiant river. Smoke curled around her ankles. The lava whistled like a teapot full of excitement. But the child did not burn. Lilikoi took another step, then another. The hellacious river to the child was nothing more than an adventurous trail warming their feet. As the sun rose, Lilikoi left the stream of lava and returned to the village. Everyone stared as though the child had climbed out of death itself. Iolani knelt down to see his child better. He touched Lilikoi's face, their hands, their feet. No scars. Nothing. Grandmother Mele finally spoke. "The mountain knows the child well." Nobody slept much when night eventually arrived. Now, children often believe that magical gifts solve loneliness, but this is not true. Sometimes they worsen it. Lilikoi became famous across neighboring villages. People waited with anticipation when Kilauea opened her flaming mouth. They knew they would get to see something spectacular. Some brought offerings, some whispered questions, some brought their fear, lightly hidden. Lilikoi could leap across steaming cracks in the earth. Once, they rescued a foolish nene goose who had wandered from his flock, and the nene did not seem to appreciate it in the least. Yet despite all of this, Lilikoi envied the fishermen. The sea was so wild and brutal. It could also be sweet and tender. Songs about the ocean drifted over the water at dusk, and the ocean belonged to no one, but it also belonged to everyone. One evening, Lilikoi approached Grandmother Mele on the quiet beachside. "Why couldn't I have a water gift instead?" The old woman kept twisting her tea leaves, an offering to Pele. "Because you have lava." "But I want the ocean." "Everyone wants the ocean," Mele replied. "That's why it is dangerous." Mele did not say more. Lilikoi kicked at the black volcanic sand. That is the annoying thing about wise elders. They know how to use silence to make a point. When she felt that her silence had said enough, Mele added, "The sea gathers people together. Lava transforms the land, takes what it feels it is owed." Lilikoi muttered, "I don't want lava." Grandmother Mele sighed softly. "Child, mountains do not become oceans simply because they feel lonely." Lilikoi wasn't listening anymore, but was stomping towards home, more frustrated than ever. Years passed. Lilikoi grew taller. Their hair became long and dark, clinging to their broad shoulders like seaweed. Their voice drifted between a soft breeze and deep thunder, depending on their mood. Villagers no longer openly stared, but some still whispered. To Lilikoi, the quiet words were like rain, soaking through clothing and skin, weighing every part of the child down. And the heavier Lilikoi felt, the more they craved the weightlessness of water. Every night, they paddled their papane'enalu out into the dark. They lay on the stiff boards, staring up at the stars, coming up with plans to tame the ocean. They held their breath until their chest burned. They studied currents along the shore, measured the change in tides through the seasons, mapped a trail of stars that guided the travelers. Unbeknownst to Lilikoi, the ocean took notice. One dusk, while floating alone beyond the reef, Lilikoi heard a voice, more like a vibration from far below the surface. Sentient and ancient. Go further out. Lilikoi looked around. The waves lapped gently at the board. The fires on the beach were dying down. Go further. Lilikoi listened. Before them stretched the enormous black emptiness of the open Pacific. Barely visible beneath the surface. Something carved circles around on the hunt. Lilikoi's heart hammered against their ribs, somewhere between terror and excitement. The ocean had noticed them, at last. Lilikoi lingered on the board, feeling the presence of this being, until their eyes began to droop and the stars began to fade. It was time to return to shore. Once there, curious Lilikoi found the old fisherman Nalu. If anyone had knowledge about the voice, it would be him. Once, Nalu had been pushed far out to sea in a storm. It took him 13 days to find his way back to the shore, long enough that everyone had felt the grief of his presumed death. Lilikoi approached gently, knowing the man preferred to be alone. Nalu, I do not mean to disturb you while you work, but last night I heard a voice calling me out to sea. The man nearly dropped the net he was repairing. Never answer the deep water. Lilikoi frowned, disappointed. Why? Nalu glanced toward the sea, holding his breath. Fishermen often look at the ocean the way gamblers look at loaded dice, with affection and suspicion. The ocean, it gives, he said, but first it measures what you are willing to lose. Lilikoi folded their arms. Maybe the sea wants me to understand it. Maybe it will teach me how to strengthen my powers. Nalu barked out a laugh. The sea teaches everyone, but usually by drowning them. Lilikoi smiled, a dangerous smile. The kind of smile that young people wear when they have already decided not to listen. That year, the storm season was already arriving, early by weeks. Clouds stacked across the horizon like huge stones. Rain hammered the islands. The sea churned, foaming and furious. Even experienced sailors like Nalu stayed ashore. But during one of these early storms, as Lilikoi stood on the beach in the dark, rain soaking their clothes, a deep, vibrating voice returned. Go further. Lightning flashed across the water. The sky roared like 1,000 drums, and still the voice called through the noise, Go further! Lilikoi stepped into the hungry surf that was lashing at the beach. Their papa Ne'enalu heaved violently against the pounding water, but Lilikoi pressed on, further and further. Their body bruised and bled from being dragged and smashed against the rough stones and the reefs. Lightning revealed mountains of water rolling towards the shore, behemoths swallowing everything in their wake. Back on the shore, villagers slept, unaware of the danger Lilikoi was in. To Lilikoi, a mystery lay ahead. Power, belonging. At times, the waves engulfed the growing child, pressing them down and holding them there. The air and the sea were frigid, numbing Lilikoi and making it difficult for them to fight their way to the surface. But as quickly as the storm arrived, it vanished into a soft drizzle and ribbons of vapor. Below, darkness stretched forever. Lilikoi could no longer see the island, and the currents here were unfamiliar. As they sat catching their breath, something wrapped around their ankle, slowly at first, almost timid. Lilikoi pulled against it, but it gripped tighter, digging into their coconut husk-colored skin. Not a hand, not seaweed, something serpentine. The ocean itself was pulling downward. Lilikoi pulled away again, gripping the board hard, and the water tightened too. Their breath caught in their throat, shocked by the sharp pain. They felt more tentacles wrapping around their legs. The board flew from their desperate hands as a final yank pulled them under the surface. clawing against the squeezing force, Lilikoi understood. The voice had not invited them. It had baited them. The deep water did not want a partner. It wanted to remove an annoyance. Lilikoi fought upward with every ounce of strength. The massive serpents of water wrapped around Lilikoi's chest and sides, squeezing against their ribs, threatening to shatter the bones, and their lungs screamed. Far above, the surface grew impossibly distant. Beneath them opened a cavernous mouth, a vast circular abyss. The watery fingers dragged down harder and harder, and within the deep came a rumble. "You wanted to know me. This is who I am." Lilikoi wanted to beg for life, but only bubbles escaped, drifting away from them. The abyss surged closer, and as they fought, panic spread through them like a fire fed by heavy winds, wanting to shed this selfish person they'd become, so obsessed with power and never really knowing true loneliness. They knew now death in the ocean is the greatest isolation one can ever experience. And then they felt something in the darkness move past them, pushing a current of water in their direction. Something. Not the ocean itself, but of the ocean? Something somehow older than the seas gliding through the deep. The pulling force of the ocean loosens just a little bit, uncertain. And against a glimmer of effervescent light emerged a turtle, its shell reflecting small bits of light from far above. It is said that a honu, a turtle, chanted the world into being. It was born from the deepest darkness, and because it created all things, it was said to be a guardian. Humans in particular perplex the turtle. She is said to turn herself into human girls to watch children play along the shore, and her amusement with young humans has never dulled. Her olive eyes sparkled with bright green freckles like a spray of jungle rain. She pushed herself between Lilikoi and the ocean's arms. The ocean bayed with a desperate moan of anguish. Current slammed against the turtle, but the creature held firm. Its rocky shell glowed red from within. Steam erupted around it, creating a net of warm bubbles. Land and sea together. Lilikoi and the turtle rose gently to the surface, through the darkness, through the growing current that was growling. The turtle and human climbed higher and higher until they burst through the surface in an explosion, gasping, coughing up water and desperation from burning lungs. As thought and senses returned to Lilikoi, they noticed the sky, calmly silent as if nothing had just happened. By dawn, Lilikoi was asleep on the turtle's back, exhausted and dreamless. A pink sunlight trickled across the horizon. Mololo, flying fish, flung themselves above the surface like silver arrows. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, heat poured down on the child, and their eyes fluttered open. They lay heavily on the turtle's shell, still too weak to move, but not too weak to think. Why did I chase what wishes to consume me? Why did I think the ocean would want to listen to me? The turtle rumbled softly, as if hearing the child's thoughts. The sound was like underwater boulders rocking against each other when hit by the undercurrent. Lilikoi looked at the shell, older than time itself. It was porous and rough, like the basalt shoreline back home. Hanuku, the walker between waters, reborn over and over again where lava enters the sea. Seaweed drifted from cracks in the volcanic stone, and tiny tide pools rested atop the shell. Warm steam rose from beneath the coral reefs growing along its sides. "You are both," Lilikoi whispered. Another rumble of acknowledgement. "Then you understand." Lilikoi drifted off to sleep again, but this time, dreams filled their mind. In one dream, the Hanuku appeared, and in a voice deeper than the ear can hear, she spoke. "Balance is not becoming all things. Balance is learning where your spirit stands in all things." Easy for you to say. You belong to both worlds. Hanuku was silent for a long time. In the silence, the world became, and unbecame. Then the turtle said, "What have you learned about loneliness?" That landed harder than any wave. The dream faded as Lilikoi healed and regained strength. Hanuku carried her chosen burden for many days. It was the longest time she'd spent with a human, and she mapped the child's heart, trying to better understand how Lilikoi came to be in the middle of the ocean, so far from home. She mapped the thoughts Lilikoi avoided, she traced forgotten memories, and at night the stars spread overhead so thickly they looked like clouds. During the day, whales sprayed salt into the air with their heavy exhales. As the turtle learned the child's soul, the child studied the turtle's back. The more Lilikoi examined, the more it looked like a giant island. There were black stone cliff sides, waterfalls with rainbows forming in their midst, miniature birds nesting in dainty dwarf trees. And beneath it all radiated a volcanic heat. It was beautiful and inspiring. And lonely, an island all on its own, forever drifting. Lilikoi wondered if the turtle felt lonely. No one else was like her in all the world. That must hurt sometimes, the child thought. The turtle lifted its ancient head towards the horizon, almost seeming to smile. It must be exhausting to exist this way, the thoughts continued, forever known and yet also unknown, not wanting to be seen yet longing to be close, to live in the ocean, but just to be drawn to the sand. Lilikoi sighed unexpectedly, recognizing that something was hitting a little close to home. That evening, Hanuku carried the child to a cave hidden by the jutting cliffs on the south side of the island. The water crashed against the sides of the cave, and deep beneath the cave bubbled underwater lava vents, fire and sea together, meeting as if for the first time. Lilikoi climbed the slippery stone walls and found a perch to rest. I wanted to leave this, to destroy it because it wasn't good enough, the child said out loud for the first time in many days. Their voice was hoarse and almost unrecognizable, and their face darkened with shame. Hanuku seemed to listen. When I was younger, I hated my divided nature. I kept pretending to be okay with it, but I just wanted to be like everyone else. Normal. I think a part of me wanted to die when I left the shore. Before you saved me, I think I felt something briefly like resignation. Like it was something that always had to happen. Hanuku watched, breathing in such a way that betrayed her hidden tiredness. My will to escape was not as strong as my will to find relief from how I felt about myself. But you saw something different, didn't you? You've seen everything. Probably even other people like me. Lilikoi laughed to themselves. My grandmother saw me the way that you do. But I don't think she was willing to see how much I hurt. And I was living with this terrible temptation to crack open the world simply so someone could finally notice that I was suffering. Then the child heard the gentle tremor Kilauea welcoming them home. But then, surprising them both, lava began pouring down the cliffside. Confused, Lilikoi raced to the edge of the cave to look up and watched the red river glow wider and wider. This wasn't a welcoming. Something bigger was happening. Never, even in Grandma Melee's childhood, had the lava ever come this far south. Lilikoi looked back at the Hanuku for understanding. But the old turtle was already making her way out to sea, her job complete. The child climbed the cliffside to see what was above, and what they saw was devastating. In front of them was a glowing lake as far as their eyes could see. Heat rolled towards them in great breathing gusts, and from a distance too far to see, Kilauea watched, proud of the work it had done in the child's absence. Volcanoes are vengeful, jealous creatures at their worst, and Kilauea had something to say about Lilikoi's absence. I didn't know, they said quietly to the steaming liquid rock. I am afraid to see what you might have done." Their burning heart quivered with fear. Lilikoi continued, "But I know I can't hate you for it, even if the worst has happened. I understand that it is your way of speaking when I don't listen to your gentle whispers." Up on the mountain, too far away to see, the molten heart began to dim. Lilikoi stepped onto the lake, letting the steam curl around their ankles. "You created all this land," they said. "People live because of you. Forests grow because of you. Our songs exist because of you. I did not mean to abandon you. But I did chase something else. I did think that maybe you weren't enough." Lilikoi breathed deeply, being present with the disappointment and anger of an island abandoned. The magma quieted. Far away, a hungry mouth stopped widening. Glad not to be alone anymore, Lilikoi smiled sadly and confessed, I think I was drowning before I ever touched the water." That landed harder than the sun crashing down on the earth. Kilauea's anger withered and blew away like powdery ash. Lilikoi placed a hand against their own chest. "I thought I had to become something else." The lava beneath them shimmered, listening. "I thought if I could control the ocean, people would stop seeing me as strange. But the ocean nearly swallowed me because I was asking for it to tell me who I am. But I should have known. And you could have reminded me if I ever forgot. But I never asked you." Lilikoi pictured the burning core of the mountain. "It's no one's fault that I'm lonely. Not even mine." Lilikoi realized the mountain was not merely listening. It was exhausted, unimaginably weary, tired of carrying an entire island on its back, tired of being unseen, burning beneath the earth, trying to stay in control, tired of accepting isolation as a punishment for being outspoken. Fire climbed around Lilikoi's legs in glowing ribbons. The child who thought so little of their gift now stood entirely within it, feeling connected to something bigger than a person or a place. No longer resisting the sadness, no longer putting on a brave face for everyone else, but instead belonging to the very core of everything and becoming less and less like the villagers. Lilikoi sat down, soaking in the heat, immersing deeper into the mountain's vast psyche. The entire earth seemed to shake in response. For one terrible moment, the child thought the mountain might explode. Instead, the lake began to cool, rock settling back into the earth, returning to its dreamlike peacefulness. As lava dripped away in black pearls from Lilikoi's body, the child stood and began the journey back home, alone, but not at all lonely. They knew that underneath everything was something that made their whole world possible. They laughed, thinking about how the people would react. They just couldn't help themselves. They would never understand. When the child approached the village, they were relieved to see that the huts were still standing, and Grandma Mele was waiting on the shore, watching for Lilikoi with her sturdy hands on her wide hips. Hearing a familiar gait behind her, she turned her head towards the sound, hiding her joy quickly behind a frown. "What did I tell you?" she demanded, turning fully towards Lilikoi. "I forgot." "You forgot. Wonderful. Well, I shall have to keep reminding you then." Her tone was bitter, but her eyes shone with relief. That evening, the village gathered beneath the stars. Drums echoed, children danced barefoot across the warm sand. Elders shared roasted fish wrapped in banana leaves. Before long, it was time to talk story, to turn history into myths. Surrounded by so many neighbors, Lilikoi felt like a part of something. The child stood up to speak, and the people quieted, and the story began. There was no heroism in the story, but not a word was spoken the whole time. They stared, transfixed. They were in awe. The children listened, widest-eyed of all, especially the ones who had already felt different and the quiet ones and the uncertain ones, the ones carrying questions too large for the adults to answer. One little child finally asked, "So, what are you now?" Lilikoi looked towards the volcano, then towards the ocean, then toward a sky full of guiding stars. And they smiled. Yes. Some people squinted in confusion and some whispered, but Grandma Melee, well, she was laughing. The end.